My name is Trisha Evans. I'm 29 years old. And on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day, my own father refused to walk me down the aisle. Not because he was sick. Not because of an emergency. But because my sister, who has despised me for as long as I can remember, decided to throw a party on the very same day. And my father chose her. I remember the moment as if it happened yesterday. I had spent the entire morning glowing with anticipation. Hair pinned into a neat updo, makeup set perfectly, the lace of my gown brushing against my legs with every step. My bouquet was a mix of white roses and soft blue hydrangeas. Everything had been carefully planned for months. Then, just 2 weeks before the big day, my father called me with the news that still makes my stomach twist. "Trisha," he said, his voice strangely formal, "I don't think I'll be able to make it to the ceremony on time. Vanessa's event is really important to her career. And as her father, I need to be there for her." Vanessa's event was a so-called career celebration, the exact same day and just hours before my ceremony, at a country club almost 2 hours away from my venue. It wasn't just poor timing. It was a direct conflict that made it impossible for him to attend both. He claimed he would make it work, but I knew better. My sister had set the trap, and he had walked right into it. It wasn't the first time she had done this. Growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in what outsiders would have called a picture-perfect family, I was my father's shadow. He was tall, confident, with that prematurely salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished even in his 30s. He was my hero. We built science fair volcanoes together, threw baseballs in the yard, and he told me I had the brightest mind he'd ever seen. But when I was 12, everything changed. My mother, Eleanor, the glue that held us together, fell ill with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 6 months. My father drowned himself in work to cope, and that left a vacuum, one Vanessa quickly filled. She was 3 years older, taller, more athletic, and fiercely competitive. With Dad absent, she declared herself the new lady of the house, taking over meals and decisions, and controlling the narrative about me. She painted me as needy, selfish, and rebellious, while she was the dutiful daughter keeping the home together. My father never questioned her version of events. By high school, the rift between my father and me was so wide I could barely see him across it. The night before my art scholarship ceremony, I overheard Vanessa telling him I didn't want him to attend because it would make me nervous. The next day, I sat alone while other students had proud parents cheering for them. He sent me a text saying congratulations. From a client dinner. College became my escape. The University of Pittsburgh offered me a partial scholarship, and I moved hours away. Vanessa stayed behind, cementing her place as Dad's right hand. We kept our contact polite but distant, the hurt unspoken but heavy between us. Then, in my sophomore year, I met Benjamin. He was everything I didn't know I needed: kind, grounded, and from a warm, loud, welcoming family. His mother, Laura, his father, Henry, and his uncle Jack embraced me like one of their own. Jack, a retired English professor, had a way of making me feel seen, really seen, in a way my own father hadn't in years. Benjamin proposed 5 years later with a sapphire and diamond ring, telling me he wanted to spend forever with me. I called my father the next day, bracing for his lukewarm response, and that's exactly what I got. But when I asked him to walk me down the aisle, there was a pause, and then, "I'd be honored." I held on to that small spark of hope, thinking maybe this wedding could be a bridge between us. For months I planned every detail, imagining the moment we would walk together toward my future. And then Vanessa made her move. She called me, all false sweetness, to personally inform me that her big career party was booked for June 15th, my wedding day. She claimed it was unavoidable, that it would end before my ceremony. But the venue was 2 hours away, and I knew her well enough to understand. This was deliberate. When I confronted Dad, he brushed it off as unfortunate timing, and promised to be there. But as the weeks passed, he started to hedge. He asked if we could push the ceremony back an hour. He wondered if I really needed him for pre-wedding photos. I saw where this was going. And 2 weeks before the wedding, he confirmed it. He wouldn't be there. I hung up the phone and collapsed onto the floor, the lace of my dress mockingly pristine in my mind's eye. I wasn't just losing a father-daughter tradition. I was being told once again that Vanessa came first. That night, Benjamin held me close, his voice hard with controlled anger. "He doesn't deserve you," he whispered. But I could feel the ache in my chest like a physical wound. The next day Laura called to check in, and I told her everything. Her voice was steady but full of compassion. "This is your day, Trisha. Don't let anyone steal it from you. Your father is making a choice he'll regret. But that's his to carry, not yours." It was Laura who planted the seed. She told me about how years ago, Jack had walked her down the aisle when her own father refused to attend her wedding. "Family," she said softly, "is about who shows up." I couldn't stop thinking about it. Jack had always been there, always listened, always cared. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to rewrite the tradition entirely. The next day I called him. We met at a little bookstore cafe, 2 coffees between us. My hands trembled as I asked, "Jack, would you consider walking me down the aisle?" For a moment he just stared, eyes shining, and then he reached across the table. "It would be one of the greatest honors of my life," he said. For the first time in weeks I felt lighter. My father might not show up, but someone better would. The days after Jack agreed were a blur of final preparations, but beneath the chaos of seating charts and vendor confirmations was a steady undercurrent of relief. I no longer had to dread walking down the aisle alone, nor imagine the awkward stares as guests whispered about my absent father. Instead, I could picture Jack, calm, dignified, and genuinely proud, beside me, not out of obligation but choice. Still, the hurt lingered. 3 days before the wedding, I called my father one last time, hoping, against all logic, that he might change his mind. "Dad, I just wanted to confirm if you're still coming to the reception," I said, my voice even. "Yes," he replied, distracted as always. "Should be able to make it after Vanessa's event. Probably around 7:30 or 8. I swallowed hard. "I also wanted you to know. I've asked Benjamin's Uncle Jack to walk me down the aisle." There was a pause. "Who?" "Jack Harris. He's been so supportive." It felt right. "I see," he said flatly. "Well, I suppose someone has to do it if I can't be there on time." His dismissal was like a cold wind blowing out the last flicker of hope I'd been carrying. The night before the wedding, we held a small rehearsal dinner. Jack was there in a charcoal suit, looking every bit the gentleman he was. When it came time for toasts, he stood, glass in hand, and said, "To Trisha and Benjamin, true love isn't just about finding the right person. It's about building a family of choice that lifts you up. Tomorrow, I have the honor of walking this remarkable woman toward her future, and I couldn't be prouder." His voice was steady, but I saw the way his eyes glistened. Around the table, people reached for napkins. Later that night, I made the mistake of checking social media. Vanessa had posted photos from her so-called career event setup. Only it wasn't a grand corporate gala like she'd claimed. The decorations were cheap balloons and a sad buffet table. The guest list? Mostly her gym friends and a couple of coworkers. I stared at the screen, numb. She'd lied. Again. And Dad had believed her. Again. By morning, I decided none of it would touch me. Not today. My bridesmaids arrived with coffee and pastries. The hair and makeup team worked their magic. Laughter filled the suite. And for a while, I felt like any other bride about to step into her moment. Around noon, a knock at the door. Jack stood there, immaculate in his tuxedo, holding a small gift box. "For you," he said, stepping inside. "It belonged to my mother. She carried it on her wedding day in 1930. I opened it to find a delicate lace-edged handkerchief embroidered with tiny blue flowers. My throat tightened. "It's beautiful, Jack. I'll carry it with me." He smiled and handed me a velvet pouch. "From Laura. She remembered you telling her how you loved painting and writing as a child." Inside was a silver bracelet with a charm shaped like a paintbrush crossed with a pen. My hand shook as I clasped it on. "Please thank her for me," I said, but he just nodded, knowing I'd say more when I could speak without crying. The next hour passed in a warm, nervous haze. My dress, a fitted lace gown with beading that caught the light, felt like it was made for me. My mother's pearl earrings brushed against my neck. Laura's bracelet shimmered at my wrist. Jack's handkerchief was tucked safely into my bouquet. At 3:50, the anteroom doors opened. The string quartet played the first notes of Canon in D. Jack took my arm. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, the lump in my throat almost unbearable. We stepped forward and the garden terrace opened before us. Guests turning, smiling, eyes widening. Benjamin stood at the altar, his face lit with that look that said everything. Love, awe, certainty. For the first time all day my chest felt light. Jack leaned in slightly and whispered, "Your mother would be proud." I nearly lost it right there, but I kept my eyes on Benjamin and took each step with purpose. My father's absence was a wound, but Jack's presence was a balm. The ceremony was perfect. Our vows were honest and tender. "I choose you," Benjamin said, voice breaking. "Not just today but every day after." I echoed his promise, my voice steady, my heart steadying too. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the applause was like a warm wave crashing over us. The reception hall glowed with candlelight. The air hummed with laughter, music, clinking glasses. Benjamin's father gave a speech that made me feel fully, officially like one of them. Jack's toast brought me back to the moment we met, how easily he'd made me feel safe. And the gratitude I felt was almost overwhelming. By 8:30 I knew Dad wasn't coming. I danced with Benjamin, ate cake, posed for photos, and told myself it didn't matter. Until my cousin Thomas arrived, looking unsettled. "I need to tell you something," he said, pulling me aside. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Vanessa's party, it wasn't a work thing. No promotion. No company event. Just a regular get-together she planned deliberately to conflict with your wedding." My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" "I've got proof," he said, pulling out his phone. Texts from Vanessa bragging about forcing Dad to choose, making sure he'd pick her. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it in black and white. I took a breath, fighting the urge to find my phone and call Dad right then. But this was my wedding. I wasn't giving Vanessa the satisfaction of ruining another moment. Still, the night wasn't done testing me. At 10:30 the ballroom doors opened and there he was, Dad, looking uncomfortable in a suit, carrying a gift bag. "Sorry I'm late," he said, hugging me stiffly. "Vanessa's thing ran long." I forced a smile. "Glad you could make it for the last hour." His eyes scanned the room. "So who ended up walking you down the aisle?" "Jack Harris," I said. "That older guy in the navy tux? You had a stranger do it." His tone was incredulous. "He's not a stranger to me," I replied. "He's shown me more care in a few years than you have in the last decade." His face reddened. "That's not fair." Before I could respond, Thomas walked over and told him the truth about the fake party, the text, the years of lies. Dad's face went pale as he read the proof. "This can't be right," he muttered. "It is," I said quietly. "She's been playing us both." Jack appeared then, polite but firm, reminding Dad that today wasn't the time for this conversation. Dad bristled, accusing me of replacing him. Jack's answer was calm and cutting. "Being a father means showing up, not just when it's convenient, but when it matters most." The words seemed to land like a stone in Dad's chest. He left soon after, saying he needed to talk to Vanessa. I watched him go, my heart strangely heavy and light at the same time. As Benjamin wrapped his arm around me and led me toward the sparkler send-off, I realized something. Whether Dad came back into my life or not, I was surrounded by people who chose to be there. And maybe in the end that was the family that mattered most. The night air was cool as we stepped into the tunnel of sparklers, our friends and family cheering us forward. Benjamin squeezed my hand, his smile warm, and for a few blissful moments, I let the light and laughter wash over me. We climbed into the vintage car waiting at the curb, and as it pulled away, the hotel's golden lights fading behind us, I made myself a promise. Tonight would end on joy, no matter what had happened. Our honeymoon in Greece was everything I'd dreamed of. Whitewashed villages clinging to cliffsides, turquoise seas that seemed to stretch into forever, and nights under the stars with wine and laughter. We explored ruins in Athens, wandered Santorini's winding streets, and swam in the warm waters off Crete. And for 2 whole weeks I shut out the world. No calls, no texts, no Vanessa, no Dad. It wasn't until we landed back in Philadelphia that reality crept in. My phone was flooded with notifications. 5 voicemails from Dad, each one a little more strained than the last. The final message, left just 3 days earlier, stopped me cold. "Trisha, I don't know if you're listening to these, but I need to tell you that you were right about Vanessa. After the wedding, I went to her apartment and confronted her with the text Thomas showed me. First she denied everything. Then she admitted it. Admitted she'd been twisting things for years, telling me you didn't want me there, making me believe you were pulling away. I can't believe I was so blind. I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I hope someday you'll give me a chance to make this right. I'm sorry I missed your wedding. It was unforgivable. I sat there on our couch, the voicemail still playing in my head long after it ended. Benjamin, sitting beside me, slipped his arm around my shoulders. What are you thinking? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me feels vindicated. But another part, it's just sad. Sad for all the years we lost. Do you want to call him? He asked gently. Not yet. I need time to decide if I even want a relationship with him now. Vanessa never called. The only thing I got from her was a curt email saying she was taking time away from family drama and traveling for work. Translation: running away from the mess she'd made. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in newlywed life, thank you notes, catching up at work, weekend brunches with friends. And always in the background, Benjamin's family. Laura dropping by with fresh-baked bread. Henry helping us hang art in the living room. And Jack calling every Sunday like clockwork. How are you doing, Tricia? He would ask in that warm, steady voice. Sometimes we'd talk about books or art. Other times about forgiveness. One Sunday he said something that stuck with me. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. Whether you rebuild a relationship after that, that's your choice. A month after our return, I decided I was ready to hear my father's side face to face. I called him, suggesting we meet at a cafe halfway between Philadelphia and Allentown. When I walked in, he was already there, looking older than I remembered. The lines on his face were deeper, his shoulders slightly hunched. He stood as I approached. Tricia, thank you for coming. We ordered coffee, the small talk strained until he finally said, I don't even know where to begin. I failed you. Yes, I said quietly. You did. I wasn't going to soften it for him. But I want to understand. How did you not see what Vanessa was doing all these years? He let out a long breath. After your mother died, I was drowning. Vanessa, she stepped in. Took care of things at home. I was grateful, and it was easier to believe her version of things than face my own failures as a single parent. She was my link to you. I didn't see she was controlling that link. I never wanted distance, Dad. I just couldn't handle her constant digs and lies. I know that now, he said. After the wedding, when I confronted her, she admitted everything. She's been jealous since you were kids. She told me she thought I always favored you, and when your mom died, she saw a chance to have me to herself. Have you spoken to her since? He shook his head. She left for Florida the day after I confronted her. Won't return my calls. We talked for 3 hours. There were apologies, hard truths, and moments when old pain rose like a wave between us. When it was time to leave, he said, I want to try to rebuild. I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to know the woman you've become. I'll think about it, I told him honestly. This isn't something that can be fixed in one conversation. He nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. In the months that followed, we began a careful, tentative reconciliation. Weekly calls turned into occasional visits. I introduced him properly to Benjamin's family. And Jack, ever gracious, welcomed him without bitterness. 3 months later, Dad suggested a family dinner at his place, inviting Laura and Henry too. It was awkward at first, but over dessert, I found him and Jack in the living room talking quietly. I want to thank you, Dad was saying, for being there for Tricia when I wasn't. Walking her down the aisle, that should have been my honor, but you did it with grace. She's a remarkable woman, Jack said. You should be proud. I am, Dad replied, his voice low. I just wish I'd been more present to see it happen. Vanessa stayed distant, sending only the occasional holiday card. But I stopped expecting change from her. Some relationships just aren't meant to be repaired. 6 months after the wedding, Benjamin and I hosted Thanksgiving. The table was crowded, his parents, Jack, my dad, my cousin Thomas, a few close friends. Vanessa declined the invitation. When it was Dad's turn to share what he was thankful for, his voice broke. Second chances, he said simply, and a daughter whose capacity for forgiveness humbles me. When Jack's turn came, he smiled at me. I'm thankful for the reminder that family is built on love and choice, not just blood. In that moment I realized something. My wedding day hadn't been ruined. It had revealed the truth. And in losing one tradition, I had gained something even better. A family that had chosen me, just as I chose them. By the time our first wedding anniversary came around, the raw edges of that day had softened. Not erased. Some wounds never fully heal, but softened enough that I could look back without feeling the same gut punch of betrayal. Benjamin and I decided to mark the milestone with a small dinner at our apartment, just family and a few close friends. Jack arrived in his usual understated way, carrying a bottle of wine and a gift bag. Laura and Henry followed not long after, their laughter filling the kitchen before they'd even taken off their coats. My father came too, a little later than the rest, but earlier than I had expected. It was the first time he'd been to our home since the wedding. Dinner was warm and loud, the kind of night where the conversation overlaps and people forget to check their phones. When dessert was served, Jack stood up with his wine glass in hand. 1 year ago, he began, his voice clear and steady, I had the privilege of walking this beautiful young woman down the aisle to marry the man she loves. What began as a response to absence has become one of the greatest gifts of my life. The chance to be part of Trisha and Benjamin's journey. May your marriage continue to grow in strength and joy. And may you always remember that true family consists of those who choose to love you, even when it's difficult. I didn't even try to hide my tears. Around the table there were soft smiles and nods, but it was my father's expression that caught my attention. He looked moved. His gaze flicked between me and Jack, something like humility in his eyes. For once there was no defensiveness, no tension. Just quiet acknowledgement. After everyone left, Benjamin and I lingered in the kitchen, sipping the last of the wine. You think he's really changing? Benjamin asked, meaning my father. I think he's trying, I said slowly. And that's more than I ever thought I'd get. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Work was busy, and Benjamin's engineering projects kept him on the road a few days each month. We made time for weekend breakfasts at the cafe where we'd had our first date, lazy Sunday afternoons reading in the living room, and dinners with friends whenever we could. My father began calling regularly, not just to check in but to actually ask about my life. He came to a marketing conference where I was speaking, sitting in the back row with a proud smile, and afterward told me it was the first time he'd really understood what I did for a living. It was a small thing, but it meant more than I could explain. Vanessa, meanwhile, remained a ghost. Every so often I'd see her pop up on social media. Photos in Miami, later in New York, always surrounded by new best friends, and the occasional boyfriend. She never commented on anything I posted, never liked a single photo from my wedding. I told myself I didn't care. But the truth was, part of me still wanted her to acknowledge in some way the damage she'd done. One evening in late spring, I got a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. It was Vanessa. Benjamin glanced over from the couch. Who's that? I showed him the screen. Guess she finally decided to say something. Do you want to meet her? I hesitated. Every instinct told me she was only reaching out because she wanted something. But a small stubborn part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. She was already there, perfectly put together in a way that felt calculated. Hair sleek, nails immaculate, designer sunglasses on the table beside her latte. Trisha, she said like we were old friends catching up. Vanessa, I replied, sliding into the chair across from her. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I heard you and Dad are talking again. That's right. Good for you. She took a sip of her coffee, her tone breezy. I suppose Thomas told you all sorts of things about me at the wedding. I leaned forward. Thomas showed me your texts, Vanessa. You bragged about scheduling your party to conflict with my wedding. You admitted you wanted Dad to choose you over me. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. You've always been dramatic. Do you deny it? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Look, things got out of hand. I was upset about a lot of things. You always got Dad's attention when we were kids. That's not true, I cut in. And even if it were, you had no right to sabotage my wedding. She rolled her eyes. I didn't sabotage anything. You still got married, didn't you? Her casual cruelty was like a slap. I realized then that I wasn't going to get an apology, because she didn't believe she owed me one. I don't know why you wanted to meet Vanessa, I said, standing. But if it was to clear your conscience, you failed. I don't trust you. And I'm done letting you into my life. She didn't call after me as I walked out, and I didn't look back. When I told Benjamin and my father about the meeting, they both reacted the same way, with a mix of anger and resignation. My father seemed especially pained, but he didn't try to defend her. Some doors once closed stay closed, and I was okay with that. Summer was in full swing when the final crack in Vanessa's carefully constructed facade began to show. It started with a phone call from my cousin Thomas on a Tuesday evening. "Trisha," he said without preamble, "you should probably know. Vanessa's back in town." My stomach tightened. "For how long?" "Not sure. But she's been telling people she's thinking about moving back. Something about a big opportunity here." His tone carried the skepticism I felt. When I told Benjamin later that night, he just raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't strike me as the come-home-for-family type. She wants something." He was right. Within a week, Dad called me, his voice careful. "Your sister stopped by my office today. She says she wants to make amends." "Amends?" I repeated, incredulous. "Did she actually apologize for what she did at the wedding?" There was a pause. "Not exactly. But she said she regrets how things turned out." I almost laughed. "That's not the same as being sorry." "I know," Dad said quietly. "But I'd like to believe she's sincere. I was thinking of inviting her to dinner, just the three of us, so we could talk." "Dad," I said, my patience thinning, "do you remember the text Thomas showed you? The lies she told you for years? The fake party?" "I remember," he said more firmly this time. "But she's still my daughter. And maybe I owe it to both of you to at least try." The part of me that had worked so hard to rebuild a relationship with him wanted to be supportive. But the part that still remembered walking down the aisle without him wanted to say no. In the end, I agreed, but on one condition. The dinner would be at a public place, so no one could storm out or start shouting without an audience. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. I arrived first, Benjamin's reassuring words still echoing in my mind. "You don't have to forgive her. You just have to tell your truth." Vanessa swept in a few minutes later, all charm and bright colors. Dad followed, looking hopeful but wary. The first 20 minutes were polite but hollow. She asked about my job. I asked about her big opportunity. She said she'd been offered a position with a luxury real estate firm in the city, a claim I mentally filed under unverified. It was Dad who finally steered the conversation toward the real issue. "Vanessa," he said, his voice steady but firm, "I need to know why you lied to me. About the wedding. About Trisha." Her smile stiffened. "I didn't lie. I just managed the situation." "Managed?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "You told him I didn't want him there. You told him you had a work event when you didn't. You made sure he'd miss walking me down the aisle." She glanced between us, her composure faltering. "I was hurt, okay? You two always had a bond one never did. I wanted, I don't know, to even the playing field." "You didn't even the field," I said, my voice low but fierce. "You burned it down." For a moment she looked almost remorseful. But then her chin lifted, the defensiveness sliding back into place. "Well, it's over now, isn't it? You're married. He's talking to you again. Everything worked out." Dad's face hardened. "Everything did not work out, Vanessa. You cost me one of the most important moments of my life. You've been lying to me for years and to your sister. And I let you. That ends now." Her eyes widened, as if she hadn't expected him to actually take a side. "So what? You're choosing her over me now." "I'm not choosing one over the other," he said. "I'm choosing the truth. And the truth is you've been cruel. You need to own that before we can move forward." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Vanessa stared at him, then at me, and for a fleeting second I thought she might actually apologize. Instead, she pushed back her chair. "I'm not doing this," she said, grabbing her bag. "If you want to paint me as the villain, fine. But I don't have to sit here and listen to it." She walked out, leaving her untouched plate behind. Dad let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. "I guess that's my answer. I didn't say I told you so, though it sat on the tip of my tongue. Instead I said, Some people can't handle the truth about themselves. He nodded, looking older in that moment than I'd ever seen him. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. We finished the meal in relative silence. I paid my half, hugged him goodbye, and drove home feeling oddly lighter. The confrontation hadn't changed her, but it had shifted something between Dad and me. For the first time, I believed he finally saw her clearly, and by extension saw me. That weekend, Dad came to one of my art showcases in the city. He stood in front of my pieces longer than anyone else, asking thoughtful questions, pointing out details he liked. And when he left, he hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." 2 simple sentences. But after everything, they meant the world. It happened faster than I expected. Vanessa's perfect image cracking not from family drama, but from the world she worked so hard to impress. 2 weeks after that tense dinner, my father called me early on a Thursday morning. "Trisha," he began, his voice tight, "have you seen the news?" "No," I said, already bracing for whatever was coming. "There's a story in the local business column about Vanessa." I opened my laptop while he spoke, typing her name into the search bar. It didn't take long to find it. A front-page article in the Allentown Business Daily. The headline made my stomach drop. "Prominent realtor under investigation for fraudulent listings and misrepresentation of credentials." The article laid it all out in painful detail. Vanessa had claimed to hold a real estate broker's license for over a year, using it to market herself as an elite property consultant for high-end clients. But records from the state licensing board showed her license application had been denied months earlier. She'd been working under false credentials, taking deposits on properties she didn't have the authority to sell. Several clients had filed complaints. The investigation was now public. I sat back in my chair, the words blurring slightly as I read them again. She did this to herself," I murmured. Dad sighed heavily on the other end of the line. "I don't even know what to say. She's been avoiding my calls all week, and now I know why. What happens now? She could lose everything. If it's bad enough, there could be criminal charges." He paused. "Part of me wants to call her to help her. But another part knows this is exactly what she's been doing to other people for years," I finished. Dad didn't argue. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Thomas. "So, I guess you've seen the article." "Yeah," I said. "Word around town is she's been blacklisted by a couple of the bigger real estate groups. Even her so-called friends are distancing themselves. She's burning through allies fast." I thought of all the years she had spent undermining me, making sure Dad believed the worst about me, pushing me out of my own family. Now she was the one being pushed out, except this time it wasn't my doing. It was her own lies catching up to her. That evening Dad called again. She finally answered. "And she says the whole thing is exaggerated, that the clients misunderstood, that the licensing board made a mistake. But Trisha, I don't believe her. Not anymore." The resignation in his voice was heavy, but there was no hesitation. That, more than anything, told me how far he'd come. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said quietly. "I know she's still your daughter." "She is. But she's also an adult who made her own choices. And for the first time, I'm not going to defend them." It was strange hearing him say that. For so long he'd been her shield, her advocate, even when it meant cutting me down. Now he was choosing to see her without the excuses. The next weekend, Dad came to Philadelphia to have dinner with Benjamin and me. Over pasta and wine, he admitted something I hadn't expected. "When I read that article, I thought about your wedding," he said. "I thought about how she convinced me that missing your ceremony was acceptable. And I realized that was the beginning of the end for me with her. I just didn't know it at the time." I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd imagined him having that moment of clarity. I just hadn't expected it to come wrapped in Vanessa's public downfall. After dinner, as Benjamin was in the kitchen making coffee, Dad looked at me and said, "You know, I've been thinking about Jack." "What about him?" I asked. "I owe him an apology. Not just for how I treated him that night, but for how I dismissed what he did for you. Walking you down the aisle. I should have been there. And I'm grateful he was." It was the closest he'd ever come to fully acknowledging the hurt of that day. And somehow it mattered more than I thought it would. When he left that night, he hugged me a little longer than usual. "I'm proud of you, Trisha. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for the way you've carried yourself through all of this. I watched him walk to his car, a strange mix of emotions swirling in my chest. Gratitude, sadness, relief. Vanessa's story was far from over. Rumors were already circulating that she might leave town again to escape the fallout, but I knew this much. Whatever came next, it wouldn't undo the progress Dad and I had made. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had solid ground beneath me when it came to my family. It didn't take long for Vanessa's desperation to show. 3 weeks after the fraud story broke, my father called me again. His tone clipped. "She showed up at my house last night," he said. "I set my coffee down. Without calling, without warning," he confirmed. "Banged on the door until I opened it. She was crying, but not the kind of crying you see when someone's sorry. More like she just lost control of the narrative and couldn't stand it." I could picture it perfectly. Vanessa, mascara smudged, voice pitched high, trying to pull him back into her orbit. "What did she want?" I asked. "She wants me to tell the licensing board it's all a misunderstanding. She said if I vouch for her, they'll go easy." "Dad," I said, choosing my words carefully, "if you do that, you'll be lying for her. And you'll be tied to her mess when it all blows up again." He exhaled sharply. "I told her that. I told her I wouldn't lie. She didn't take it well." "How bad?" "She accused me of abandoning her. Said I was turning into Mom. Always siding with you." His voice softened on the last part, like it hurt to even repeat it. That comparison was a knife. My mother had been the only one who tried to balance the scales between us. Vanessa had twisted even her memory into a weapon. "What did you say?" I asked. "I told her the truth. That for years I didn't see what she was doing to you. And now that I do, I can't unsee it. I told her if she wants my support, she has to be honest about everything." I imagined the way she must have looked at him after that, sharp, calculating, realizing she couldn't use the same old tricks anymore. "She left without saying goodbye," he added. "Just stormed out. I don't know if she'll call again." "Good," I said before I could stop myself. "I mean, maybe space is the only thing that will make her see herself clearly." Dad didn't argue. But Vanessa wasn't done. A few days later, I got an email from her, short, cold, and dripping with provocation. "Congratulations on finally turning Dad against me. Guess you've won after all." I stared at the screen for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard. There was a time I would have rushed to defend myself, to explain, to prove my innocence. But I had nothing left to prove. Not to her. Not anymore. I closed the email without replying. 2 nights later, Dad called me again. "She tried to go around me," he said grimly. "What do you mean?" "She contacted Jack." That stopped me cold. "Jack? Why?" "She asked him to talk some sense into me. Said she wanted him to convince me to stand up for her. Apparently she thought he'd do it to keep the peace for your sake." I could almost laugh at the absurdity if it wasn't so insulting. "What did he say?" Dad's voice carried something I hadn't heard before. A hint of admiration. "He told her peace doesn't come from covering up the truth. He told her family doesn't mean enabling someone to hurt others. And then, he told her that in all the years he's known you, he's never once seen you try to tear someone down to build yourself up." A warmth spread through my chest, the kind that only comes from someone defending you without being asked. "What did she say to that?" I asked. "She hung up on him," Dad said. I smiled, small but genuine. "Sounds about right." It was clear now, Vanessa's old strategies weren't working. She couldn't pit us against each other anymore. She couldn't twist Jack into her pawn. And the more she tried, the more she revealed exactly who she was to everyone who mattered. That weekend, Benjamin and I had my father, Laura, Henry, and Jack over for dinner. There was laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of easy conversation that fills a room like warm light. And when my father pulled Jack aside at the end of the night, I overheard him say, "You were right. Being a father means showing up. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here." Jack's reply was simple. "You're here now. That's what counts." I went to bed that night with a quiet certainty. Whatever Vanessa did next, she couldn't undo this. She couldn't undo the fact that my father had finally chosen truth over manipulation, and chosen me in the process. It was early September when Vanessa's unraveling finally spilled into the public eye in a way even she couldn't spin. I was at my office halfway through editing a marketing proposal when my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Turn on Channel 6 News right now. I pulled it up on my laptop, not sure what to expect. And there she was, Vanessa, being escorted out of a downtown property by two uniformed officers. The reporter's voiceover was merciless. Local realtor Vanessa Evans has been taken in for questioning after multiple complaints from clients who say she took deposits on homes without providing valid contracts. State investigators have confirmed she was not licensed to conduct these transactions. They showed footage of one of her former clients, a middle-aged man in a suit, speaking into a cluster of microphones. She seemed professional, convincing. I trusted her with my family's savings, and now we're out nearly $30,000. I hope she's held accountable. My stomach sank. Not because I felt sorry for her, though seeing my sister like that was jarring, but because I knew exactly how hard she'd fight to spin this. By the time I got home, Benjamin had already seen it. Your phone's going to blow up tonight, he warned. He wasn't wrong. My father called just after dinner, his voice heavy. Trisha, I saw the news. I figured you had. I went down to the station. What? Why? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. To see her. She asked for me. I gripped the phone tighter. And what did she say? She swore she's innocent. Said it's all a big misunderstanding. That her clients changed their stories after she refused to give them discounts. She even tried to tell me the licensing board's records were wrong. And you believe her? I asked carefully. No, he said after a pause. Not anymore. That pause was long enough for me to hear something in his voice I'd never heard before. Complete certainty. She asked me to hire her a lawyer, he went on. I told her I'd help with legal fees if she promised to tell the truth. She refused. Said she didn't need my conditions, just my money. And I told her no. I sat there in stunned silence, absorbing the fact that my father had finally drawn a line she couldn't cross. 2 days later, Vanessa was released pending investigation. Instead of lying low, she doubled down. She posted a long Facebook rant accusing jealous competitors of trying to ruin her career, throwing in vague references to family members who have betrayed me. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. The comments section lit up, half defending her, half tearing her apart. Former clients chimed in with their stories. Even people from high school started calling out her behavior over the years. I didn't respond, but I could feel the heat of it spreading. That weekend, Dad invited Benjamin and me to dinner at his house. When we arrived, I was surprised to see Jack there too, already seated at the dining table. I wanted you both here, Dad said, gesturing for us to sit. Because I need to say something and I want witnesses. He took a deep breath. I've spent years making excuses for Vanessa. I let her convince me you were the problem, Trisha. I let her push me away from you. And missing your wedding ceremony was the worst mistake of my life. I can't undo it, but I can promise you this. She doesn't get to control me anymore. I won't let her. The room was silent for a moment. Jack looked at him with a calm, approving expression. Benjamin squeezed my hand under the table. I appreciate that, I said quietly. More than you know. Dad leaned forward, his eyes fixed on me. If she drags you into this investigation, if she tries to pin anything on you, I will speak out. Publicly. No more protecting her. It was the first time I truly believed he would. As we left that night, Jack walked me to the car. He means it, he said softly. And you earned that. Not by demanding it, but by holding your ground. I knew he was right. And for the first time, I felt like Vanessa's collapse wasn't my battle to fight. It was hers alone. The final act of Vanessa's spiral came sooner than I expected, and in the most public way imaginable. It was a crisp October afternoon when my phone lit up with a flurry of notifications. Texts from friends, coworkers, even a couple of old college classmates I hadn't heard from in years. Every message was some version of, "Have you seen what your sister just posted?" I opened Facebook and there it was, Vanessa's long rambling tell-all video. She was sitting in what looked like her apartment, makeup perfect, hair smoothed, wearing a blazer as if she were about to deliver a corporate seminar. She started with a dramatic sigh. I've been silent for too long. My so-called family has been feeding lies about me to the public. And now I'm under investigation for things I didn't do. I want to set the record straight. She went on to claim that the fraud allegations were fabricated by jealous competitors and amplified by a vindictive sibling, who had never forgiven me for being Dad's favorite. She painted herself as the victim of a conspiracy involving me, my husband, and even Jack. She said Jack had manipulated Dad into turning against her so he could replace him at my wedding. It was surreal watching her twist events into something unrecognizable. She even implied that Dad had been pressured into cutting her off financially and suggested I'd orchestrated it all to secure my inheritance early. By the time the 15-minute video ended, my hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with something sharper. Fury. Benjamin found me at the kitchen table, laptop open, video paused on Vanessa's smug face. She really did it, huh? She dragged all of us into it, I said, my voice low. Publicly. Before I could even think about how to respond, my phone rang. Dad. I just saw it, he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. She's crossed a line. She's accusing all of us of conspiring against her, I said. I know, he replied. And she's about to learn that I won't let her rewrite the truth. The next day, Dad posted a statement on his own Facebook page. It was short, but it hit like a hammer. I am deeply disappointed by my eldest daughter's recent public statements. Her accusations are false. The truth is that her actions, both personal and professional, have caused significant harm to others, including members of her own family. I will not allow lies to stand unchallenged. I stand with my younger daughter, Trisha, whose integrity and patience in the face of years of manipulation are nothing short of remarkable. He didn't stop there. He gave a brief interview to the same local paper that had covered Vanessa's investigation, publicly confirming that she had lied to him about my wedding and created a wedge between us for years. He told them on record that missing my ceremony was the greatest regret of my life. The fallout was immediate. Vanessa's video, which had been gaining traction among her small circle of supporters, was now being shared alongside my father's statement. And in the court of public opinion, she was losing badly. Comments poured in under her video. If your own dad is saying this, maybe take a look in the mirror. This is embarrassing. Why drag your sister's wedding into it? By the end of the week, she had taken the video down. But the damage to her credibility, to her reputation, was already done. A few days later, Dad came to visit me in Philadelphia. We sat in my living room, the autumn light spilling through the windows, and he said, I didn't do it just to defend you, Trisha. I did it because I'm done being silent. I let her use my silence as her weapon for too long. Hearing that, I felt something shift permanently inside me. For years, I'd carried the weight of his absence, his belief in her lies, his willingness to stand by her over me. But now, for the first time, I truly believed that those days were over. When he left that evening, he hugged me and said, You've always deserved better from me. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you get it. And for the first time, I let myself believe him. Winter came early that year, the first frost painting the sidewalks white by mid-November. Life felt calmer than it had in a long time. The constant undercurrent of stress that had followed me for years, waiting for the next manipulation, the next ambush from Vanessa, was gone. She had retreated into silence after her video fiasco, and the investigation into her real estate dealings had gone quiet in the public eye, though I knew it was still moving behind the scenes. Thanksgiving was the real test. We hosted again, Benjamin carving the turkey while Laura and Henry laughed in the kitchen, Jack setting the table with practiced precision, and my father arriving right on time with a bottle of wine. There was no question about who was welcome and who wasn't. Vanessa had not been invited. Not out of spite, but out of choice. Some people bring a storm every time they enter the room, and I wasn't willing to risk the peace we'd built. After dinner, when the dishes were done and the guests lingered over dessert, Dad stood and cleared his throat. I just want to say something, he began, looking around the table. This is the first time in years I felt truly at home at a holiday dinner. And that's because of you, Trisha. You've shown me grace I didn't deserve. You've let me back in. And I want everyone here to know, I don't take that for granted. The room went quiet, save for the soft hum of conversation from the street outside. I met his eyes and saw something I hadn't seen since I was a child: genuine pride. Not just in me, but in the life I'd built without his help, in the family I'd chosen to stand by me when he didn't. A week later, The final chapter in Vanessa's unraveling landed in my inbox. It was a short email from Thomas with a link to a court filing public record. The state had officially revoked Vanessa's eligibility to apply for a broker's license for at least 5 years. She'd been fined heavily for her misrepresentation, and one of her former clients had filed a civil suit. I didn't forward it to Dad. He'd see it soon enough, and I didn't want that news to be the thing that defined our next conversation. Instead, I closed the email and went back to my work. Her choices were hers to live with just as mine were mine. When our first wedding anniversary rolled around, Benjamin and I kept the celebration small. Just dinner with a few friends and family at a cozy restaurant downtown. Jack, as always, was there, and when dessert arrived, he stood for a toast. 1 year ago, he said, I walked Trisha down the aisle in place of someone who couldn't be there. What I didn't realize then was that I wasn't just filling a role. I was witnessing the start of something extraordinary. Over this past year, I've seen this marriage weather storms with grace, and I've seen Trisha show more strength and forgiveness than most people could muster in a lifetime. You've taught all of us what it means to choose your family, and I couldn't be prouder to call you mine. I looked around the table at Benjamin, steady as ever, at Laura and Henry, warm and unwavering, at my father, who met my gaze without flinching, and at Jack, whose presence had been the bridge between my past and my present. Later that night, walking home under the city lights, Benjamin slipped his arm around me. You know, he said, I think your wedding day turned out exactly the way it was supposed to. I smiled because he was right. My father not walking me down the aisle had once felt like the deepest betrayal, but it had made space for someone who wanted to be there, who had always been there. And in the end, that moment had forced the truth into the open, breaking years of lies and giving me back a relationship I'd thought was gone forever. Family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who shows up, especially when it's hard, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when it's easier not to. And as I looked ahead to the years to come, I knew I'd never walk alone again.